You know what's wild, man? Every now and then in sports, you get these teams that don't just win, they completely change the way you feel about the game. Like they make you stop whatever you're doing, sit down, and just go, holy shit, what am I even watching right now? And Brazil's 2002 squad was exactly that. They weren't just playing football, they were putting on a show, like watching a band at the peak of their powers, every player a superstar in their own right. But somehow all synced into this beautiful chaos. And the thing about them is, you didn't even need to be a hardcore football nerd to appreciate it. You could be a casual fan, someone who only tunes in every 4 years, and still you'd look at those guys and think, this is different, this is special, because it was more than gold, more than trophies. It was magic, it was art, it was a carnival on the biggest stage in the world. And the crazy part is the whole thing had storylines, drama, redemption, controversy, flair, like a movie script unfolding in real time. And that's why today we're going to dive deep into why that squad wasn't just great. They were unforgettable, and why 2 decades later people still call them the most entertaining team ever. Man, when you talk about Brazil's 2002 squad, you can't escape the fact that the heartbeat, the soul, the electricity of that team was this unreal trio: Ronaldo, Rivaldo, and Ronaldinho. And it's almost like the football gods decided to put together the ultimate highlight reel in human form, because each of those guys had such a distinct energy, but together they were devastating. Like you're watching a live action cheat code on the world stage. And Ronaldo would start there. This guy was a walking redemption story, coming back from injuries, everybody doubting if he'd ever get back to the same level. And then he shows up with that wild haircut, looking like some dude from a cartoon, and he starts destroying defenders with those trademark runs, that insane acceleration, and the way he could stop, shift, and shoot in one motion. It was like he was operating at a different speed than everyone else. But then right next to him, you've got Rivaldo, who was just a silent assassin, tall, elegant, left-footed sniper, a guy who could score outrageous goals out of nowhere, bicycle kicks, volleys, long-range rockets, but also someone who had this calmness in the chaos. Like while defenders are panicking, Rivaldo is just standing there with that posture, picking the exact second to release a pass or curl a shot into the top corner. And then add Ronaldinho into that cocktail. My God, this kid was basically football jazz. Unpredictable, full of flair, smiling while he's humiliating world-class defenders, doing step-overs, elasticos, no-look passes. He was playing like he was at a street party, except it was the World Cup, the highest pressure environment on earth. And he didn't care, he thrived in. And the crazy thing is, these three guys weren't just highlight merchants. They had end product. Ronaldo finished the tournament as the top scorer with 8 goals. Rivaldo was clutching goals and assists when they needed it most. And Ronaldinho was dropping magic, like that iconic free kick against England where David Seaman is still looking up wondering what the hell just happened. So when you put all that together, it's not just talent, it's chemistry. It's this perfect storm of power, finesse, and creativity. And the way they fed off each other made defenders terrified, because how do you defend that? If you double Ronaldo, Rivaldo's free. If you mark Rivaldo, Ronaldinho's dancing around you. And if you somehow slow Ronaldinho down, Ronaldo's already past your backline. The energy of that trio is why people still talk about 2002 like it was a movie, because it wasn't just about winning, it was about putting on a show that felt supernatural, like you were watching something that may never be recreated. Ronaldo's redemption in 2002 is one of those stories that almost feels scripted. Like if you made a Hollywood movie about it, people would say it's too unrealistic, because here's a guy who was supposed to be finished, like really done. His knees were shredded. He'd missed 2 years of top-level football, and people were calling him a busted prospect, saying the phenomenon was over. And you have to remember the last World Cup before that in '98. He had that infamous night, the seizure, before the final, the pressure in the whole world questioning what happened, and Brazil losing badly to France. So this dude comes into 2002 carrying not just injuries, but a whole nation's doubt on his shoulders. And then what he does is insane. He basically transforms the narrative of his entire career in the span of a month. You look at him and you think he's not even fully fit. That goofy triangle haircut makes him look like a meme before memes even existed. But the way he moved with the ball, the sharpness of his runs, The timing, the finishing, it was like he was born for this one last day. And the redemption arc is so wild because you've got this mix of sympathy and awe. Everyone knew what he'd been through. Those brutal rehab sessions, the surgeries, the endless hours of trying to get back when most players would have retired. And then he comes out and drops 8 goals in the tournament, and it wasn't just padding stats. These were clutch goals, 2 in the final against Germany, the kind of game where legends are made or broken. And he just looks unstoppable. Oliver Kahn was the best keeper in the world, and Ronaldo put him in the dirt. And in that moment, all the pain, all the criticism, all the whispers about him being done got obliterated. Because what you saw was a guy who refused to quit, who refused to let his story end on a tragedy. It's powerful because it wasn't just football fans who felt it. Even casual people who didn't care about the sport knew something special was happening. Like this was bigger than goals and trophies. It was about a human being reclaiming his destiny in the most dramatic way possible. And that's why Ronaldo's redemption in 2002 still gives people chills, because it wasn't just about a striker winning a World Cup. It was about watching a man rise from the ashes when everyone thought the fire was gone. The style of play that Brazil brought in 2002 was like watching a symphony played at full volume but with samba drums underneath it. Man, it wasn't just football, it was art. It was chaos and beauty meshed together in this way. Only Brazilians seemed to understand it, because while other teams were structured and rigid, Brazil was like, yeah, we'll defend when we need to, but mainly we're here to entertain. And you felt that every time the ball hit Ronaldinho's feet, when he'd start dancing with defenders, throwing out step-overs, no-look pass, bending free kicks that made physics look like a suggestion instead of a rule. And then you had Rivaldo, who was more precise, more surgical, just lurking on the edge of the box, ready to drop some ridiculous left-foot strike that made goalkeepers look helpless. And Ronaldo, he was the spearhead, the ruthless finisher, running at defenders with that low center of gravity, an explosive burst that left them in panic. But the magic was that it wasn't just the trio, it was the entire team feeding into this vibe. Cafu and Roberto Carlos pushing up from fullback like jet engine, bombing down the wings and turning defense into attack in seconds. And you watch Roberto Carlos blasting up the field with those cannon legs. You never knew if he was going to launch a 40-yard shot or whip in a cross that curved like a boomerang. And the whole thing just had this swag, its confidence, like Brazil knew they weren't just there to win. They were there to show the world what football could look like when it was freed from fear. Because most teams play not to lose, Brazil played to put on a show, and that's why people were glued to the screen. It was the unpredictability. One moment, they're knocking it around casually, the next Ronaldinho is chipping the keeper from 40 yards, and defenders are just shaking their heads like, what the hell do we even do against this? And the truth is, there wasn't much you could do, because even when the game got tense, even when they were pressured, Brazil had this composure to just keep playing their way. And that's the essence of 2000. It made every single match feel like an event, like you weren't just watching a tournament, you were witnessing a carnival of football that's still unmatched 2 decades later. What made Brazil's 2002 team so unstoppable wasn't just the magic of Ronaldo, Rivaldo, and Ronaldinho. It was the supporting cast and the balance that glued the whole thing together, because people forget that as flashy as that squad was, it had a backbone of warriors and specialists who knew their role and executed it perfectly. Like you had Cafu and Roberto Carlos as full band. These guys weren't just defenders, they were engines, machines. Cafu bombing up and down the right flank with endless stamina, constantly overlapping and giving the attack an extra dimension. And Roberto Carlos on the left, man, that dude was like a comic book character. Explosive run, thunderbolt shots, insane crosses. He could switch the momentum of a game in one run, but then to balance all that attacking flair, you had Gilberto Silva and Kleberson in midfield, guys who were grinders, who put in the dirty work so the artists up front could paint. Gilberto especially, he was like a human shield, always intercepting passes, breaking up play and making sure the defense didn't get exposed. And then you've got Lucio, Roca Jr. and Edmilson at the back. Those guys were not the flashiest, but they were tough, physical, and willing to put their bodies on the line. And that's the thing people don't appreciate. Brazil was not just vibes and tricks. They were a perfectly balanced machine where the stars could shine because the rest of the team made it possible. Like Rivaldo doesn't get space to cut in if Cafu isn't stretching the defense wide. Ronaldo doesn't get that room to explode if Gilberto Silva isn't locking down midfield. Ronaldinho doesn't get to improvise if Lucio isn't covering the counterattacks. And even between the posts, you had Marcos, a guy who was steady, dependable, and rose to the occasion when they needed it. So, when you look at the whole structure, it's not just 11 random stars thrown together. It was a carefully blended mix of flair and grit, attack and defense, chaos and control. And that's what made it so deadly, because if you pressed high, they had the speed and skill to rip you apart on the counter. If you sat deep, they had the creativity to unlock you. And it's wild to think about, because so many great teams have one or two weaknesses. But Brazil in 2000, that supporting cast gave the superstars the freedom to be themselves, while keeping the team grounded enough to actually win, which is why that squad still feels like the perfect marriage of beauty and balance in football history. The impact and legacy of Brazil's 2002 squad is one of those things that stretches way beyond just lifting a trophy, because yeah, they won the World Cup, but the way they did it and the energy they carried completely reshaped how people thought about the game. Is like a reminder that football could still be fun, it could still be art, it could still make you feel like a kid watching magic happen. And that vibe stuck with an entire generation, because after the tactical, rigid, almost robotic style of the Brazil came in with this explosion of flair, unpredictability, and pure joy, and you saw kids all over the world trying to do Ronaldinho's tricks, mimicking Rivaldo's left foot rockets, or cutting their hair like Ronaldo with that bizarre triangle. And that's when you know a team leaves a legacy. When they're not just winning games, they're shaping culture, they're influencing playgrounds, they're inspiring the next wave of stars. And the impact wasn't just cultural, it was historical too, because that was Brazil's 5th World Cup, cementing them as the kings of the country of football. And the squad itself became this benchmark for attacking football. Every team since then gets compared to them when people talk about entertainment versus efficiency, and honestly, it's rare you get a side that nails both. Because Brazil weren't just entertained. They were ruthless winners, and that balance is what etched them into history, and the legacy of that team lingers in debates today. Whenever people talk about the most fun national teams ever, they don't even argue much, they just say 2002 Brazil, because it's almost universally accepted. And think about the individuals too. Ronaldo cements his redemption arc, Ronaldinho explodes onto the global stage, Rivaldo solidifies his status as one of the greats, Cafu and Roberto Carlos redefine the fullback role. And even the less glamorous guys like Gilberto Silva get remembered as unsung heroes, and the ripple effect is insane, because so many kids who watched that World Cup went on to become professionals themselves, inspired by what they saw. Like Neymar has said countless times how much that Brazil team shaped him. And when you zoom out, the legacy is this idea that football doesn't have to choose between winning and entertaining. You can have both. You can dominate the world and still make it look like a carnival. And that's why even 20 years later, when people talk about the most iconic squads, that Brazil team is always front and center. Because they left behind more than medals, they left behind a feeling, and that's what real legacy is. When you wrap it all up and look back at Brazil's 2002 squad, it's like you're talking about a once-in-a-lifetime moment in football history, because it wasn't just about the fact they won a World Cup. It was about how they did it, with that swagger, that that balance between ruthless efficiency and pure entertainment. And it's crazy, because you don't just remember the goals or the trophies, you remember the feelings, like where you were when Ronaldinho chipped in, or when Ronaldo walked up with that haircut and then destroyed Germany in the final. And it leaves you thinking, damn, this is why people fall in love with the game in the first place. This is why football feels bigger than sports sometimes, because it gives you these characters, these stories, this sense of magic that sticks with you forever. And Brazil in 2002 was all of that rolled into one carnival of football. And honestly, I don't know if we'll ever see something like it again, because it wasn't just about talent, it was timing, it was redemption. It was the perfect mix of styles and personalities, and that's why 2 decades later we're still talking about them like legends, because they are legends, they transcended the game. So if you take anything from this, it's to appreciate moments like that, because they don't come off. And when they do, they define eras. And hey, thank you for hanging out, for diving into this story with me. It's been a blast reliving that magic. And good luck to you in whatever you're chasing. Keep that fire alive, keep that passion burning, because just like Brazil, and the world remembers the ones who dared to shine. So thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next time.